friends, this is Caly Person, and I'm glad you're here with me today. I'm sharing a card made using the Mermazing set, and I've created an underwater scene over an ink blended pennant using Distress Oxide inks. To start, I'm going to be stamping my images using some MFT inks. There are solid stamps that I'm using as well for my scene today that required colored ink, and I'm going to give them some shading, so I'm going to use 2 colors for each of these images. As you can see, I've already stamped once using some Coral Crush ink, and then with my finger dauber, I'm going to apply the second layer of ink using Razzle Berry ink. It's a darker shade that creates an ombre look to the image, and applying it with a finger dauber really allows for a seamless transition between the colors. Now the greens I'm using today are Green Room and Field Day by MFT. So I'm still applying the lighter color first and then using my finger dauber to apply that darker shade and then stamping it for that seamless ombre look. Alright, I'm going to quickly color my rock and mermaids now with Copic markers. I'm using quite a few markers on the rock here. I think I used 4. This allows for some quick, smooth coloring and blending between the colors when you have a lot of markers in the same color family. But if you only have 2 markers, it just requires a little bit more blending, but I think you can get the same look. On the hair, I'm adding color and strokes by using a flicking motion with each shade. On this particular mermaid, I'm starting with the darker flicks first, going to the medium, and then the light to fill in the colors. And then I'll go back to intensify the dark if I need to. I started with the darker color here, but you'll see in a little bit when I start working on the second mermaid that I actually go with the lightest shade first. There's no reason for this, I just pick up whatever I have closest to me, and honestly you can create the same look going either way. It's all about blending and the look that you're going for. Sometimes I intentionally start with the lighter color thinking it might be a little bit easier to blend colors, but it really depends on the markers that you choose, and so it takes a bit of trial and error. So on the rest of the images, I'm going to go ahead and apply the darkest color first. I'm intentionally applying at the bottommost portion of each section of an image, and then I'm going to blend lighter going up, so it's like the light is casting from above. So now here we are with the second mermaid. I've started with the lightest color first, adding the medium, and then flicking towards the end with the darker color. And now for this mermaid, earlier I had gone back in with the darkest marker and flicked the hair to intensify that dark hair. On this one I actually went over it with the lightest color again just to smooth it all out a little bit more. So really it just depends on the look that you're going for. On the tail, once more, I am applying the darker color first, towards the bottom and at the creases, and then I'm going to lighten up going towards the top. Now after die cutting all of my images, I'm just going to go through with my gel pen and then add some gel highlights to each of my images. It really helps the images pop and give it a little bit more character. Before I ink blend this pennant from the Hip Hooray Die-namics set, I'm going to lay out my stencil to mark where I want to use it, and then just mark it with a little dot so that I know where I want the colors to start and stop. I was just using that die for reference, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that, and now I'm going to start ink blending with those Distress Oxide inks. I'm starting with the Cracked Pistachio, and on this one I'll be filling the entire panel with ink. Once I move on to my second color, which is Peacock Feathers, I'm going to use my stencil and use those dots as a guide for my stencil that I placed there earlier so that I don't go above or beyond where I wanted my inks to be. So now I'm ink blending where that stencil starts all the way down. So we're just layering the colors as we go down, and once I'm done with this color, I'll move on to the third color, which is Mermaid Lagoon, and again I've used my stencils to place them where I had marked them with my pencil earlier, and I'm just going to layer that ink and go all the way down as I did before with the second color. And now that I have these ribbons of color, I can go ahead and add some texture using my spray bottle. I'm just going to add a few droplets, let it set for a second, and then dab up the rest with a paper towel. I can go ahead and die cut my pennant now, and once I have that, I decided I wanted to add more texture to it with some white paint. Just wanted to show you here how I splatter with my white paint. I have some acrylic paint in this little jar here that I've mixed probably 1 part paint and 2 parts water, and then I just shake it up whenever I need it. Then I grab my brush that I love to use for splattering, and I usually pick up the paint from the lid. That way I don't pick up too much and I can control how much gets on the brush. And then I just use my left index finger and just tap my brush against it to get those splatters. I realized that paint needs to dry, so I've set that aside and started working on my sentiment. If you're really worried about not having enough time for your paint to dry, I recommend you doing that before you start coloring your images. That way there's plenty of time for it to dry before assembling your card together. For my sentiment, I'm using blue raspberry cardstock. I love this color. I'm just going to stamp with Versamark ink and add some white embossing powder, and then I'm going to cut that strip down using my trimmer. To give my card some dimension, I'm adhering this pennant to my card base using foam adhesive. I like to lay out my images before adhering them down, so that's what I'm doing right now. And then using liquid adhesive, I'm going to adhere the bottommost layers down first. This gives me a great idea of where I want things to lie before I adhere them down and make it all permanent so that I don't goof up. And so I'm going to start adhering that sentiment strip down first and then layering that mermaid over that sentiment just to hide the edge or the end of that sentiment strip. And then next I'm going to do the rock and then the algae. And then for the final two images, I'm going to use foam adhesive just to give it a little bit more dimension. I could finish here, but I decided to add one final touch, and that's adding a few dewdrops to emulate some bubbles. I'm choosing from two sizes, and I'm just going to lay them down first to make sure the placement is right before I adhere them down with my liquid glue. I know it looks white at first, but once it dries, the adhesive will be clear, and then it will look like little water droplets. And that finishes my card today. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for stopping by, and please take care. Bye!